Greetings, everybody. This is Nicholas Eidolon welcoming you back for the last time this season to the Analog Dungeon. This is episode 12. This is the last episode of this first season. So after this one, there will be a break wherein I will hopefully be making some positive adjustments, getting some stuff filmed in advance, launching the Facebook page. I don't know what else. Maybe some more cool stuff will happen. But that's all I've got planned for the moment. So I don't have a lot to talk about beforehand on this episode. We really want to jump right into it because I've actually got a fair amount of notes to get through here. Took a lot of notes for this episode. In the background, oh wait, we gotta do our hot fern updates. So fern's looking good. Probably needs to be watered tomorrow. We've got a little bit of brown on one leaf here and on a couple of leaves here, but I think we're gonna be okay. They're looking good. So in the background, you can hear Secret Stairways. This is the 2-tape compilation of Enchantment of the Ring and Turning Point that just came out recently on White Wolf Productions out of Italy, and this is one of the most well-regarded pieces of classic 90s dungeon synth. This is an American artist, Matthew Davis, who sadly is not alive today to see the impact of his work on the flourishing dungeon synth community. But we will cover this probably in season 2, maybe in the finale of season 2. This is definitely one where I want to take some more time with it and really formulate my thoughts on it, I think, because it's an important piece and it's not one that I just want to throw into any old episode. But yeah, that's Enchantment of the Ring and Turning Point, and that's going to play in the background while we talk today. So today, not every episode is going to be themed. We're going to do some themed episodes. We're going to do label dives, but sometimes it's just going to be whatever I look into my collection and pick out. That's really the vibe I'm going for, is just a nice selection of tapes, some deep cuts, some stuff everybody knows and likes. But today what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of my personal favorites for the season finale. And when I say personal favorites, this is not like a comprehensive list of what I like best. This is just some tapes that have always stood out to me for one reason or another, in terms of quality, of subject matter, style. Some of it is stuff that I loved before I even got my hands on it. Some of it is stuff that I bought and listened to maybe for the first time after I bought it and just really loved. So just some stuff that I found that was just amazing, that I didn't even realize was so good until after I had the tape. Because I do try to do that sometimes. I do try to blind buy tapes. So if I'm buying something from a label and it's something I know, and then there's something available that I don't know, sometimes I'll pick it up, because it's fun to have that experience. It's fun to get a piece of music and put it on in analog format and not know anything about it, not know what it sounds like. And that's an experience that we miss a lot. My generation, having access to the internet, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we get to experience a lot more music because of that, and these scenes can kind of develop the way they do now. But at the same time, it's a really fun experience to listen to something without being connected to the internet, to listen to something in analog. And that's really why I'm so latched on to vinyl and cassette, especially, because it is more than just the music. It's an experience with that physical format, and part of that for me is hearing stuff for the first time that way, and not knowing what I'm gonna get. So anyway, this is just a list of tapes that I've pulled out of my collection that, for one reason or another, I just really love. Some of these are in what I would probably say is like my top tier, and some of them are not. Some of them are just stuff I really love. And there's other stuff in my collection that I could have pulled instead of these. And we'll probably do more of these episodes where I'm pulling personal favorites. But to get started, first up, we're going to look at Earthencloak's debut album, Commune of the Gnomes. So Earthencloak is a project out of Rhode Island, and it's attributed to an artist who just calls themselves the Yawning Druid. And this first album was released in September of 2019. July of 2018. And this was actually put out by Ancient Meadow Records on cassette. This is the 25th release from Ancient Meadow Records. A second album followed this one in September of 2019, and that's called Pipe Smoke and Fairy Magic, and that one was released on tape by the artists themselves. Let's open this up. So this cover image, immediately striking, is by an artist called Orion Portvliet, who is a Dutch painter, well regarded for his illustrations of gnomes and other fantastic subject matter. I've actually got a book of his. I've got a book of his somewhere. I'm not sure where it's at, but it's just a picture book with, about gnomes. I'll dig it out, and maybe, in fact, I should probably get some more of those, and maybe we could have sort of a book-centric episode in a future episode. That would be really cool. But yeah, so this artist is a Dutch painter who is famous for his paintings of gnomes and fantastic creatures. Inside we have another really nice illustration from that same artist of a gnome in front of their house. And then here we've got a really nice yellow tape with another one of those adhesive labels. It's got the art on it. Really beautiful presentation here. So let me read you the introduction for this album from the Bandcamp page. It says, "Come, take a journey with me. The forests are lush and thriving, deep past the meadows and the border of newly born pines, amidst the brambles and the bogs." So just take all of that in with the artwork and the whole vibe that this album is giving off before you even play it. And there's just a warmth, a delight in this whole aesthetic. I kind of wish there were more projects that leaned into this folky fairy tale vibe, and there are a good number of them. But this sort of beautiful, playful tribute to folklore and nature is just. It's something I wish I had more of. I don't want less of the other stuff, but I want more of this. Just give me more Dungeon Synth. So let's talk about some of these tracks. This album opens with a track called Dewdrops and Gossamer. So this is like an unbelievably bright, mystical sound. It's exactly what the album looks like it should sound like, just right away. It's got these pleasant, mystic chimes, these string pads. It's completely enchanting, and it sets this warm forest tone, this forested vibe. On track 2, that's called The Basket Weaver, we're led through the gnome village. We're shown the sights and the residents. And if you go to the Bandcamp page, you can actually read track by track, sort of a vague bit of flavor text as to what's going on in each track. But there's a really lovely reverence to this piece. There's these choral synths that lend an aura of awe as we look over this forest and all of the sort of infrastructure of these gnomes, their houses and their society. Next up, we have the title track, and it has a melody that is just very memorable to me. It's sort of an inaugural theme for the album, really. And I really love the way the instruments dance on this track and on the album as a whole, really. Everything's so lively and light, and the textures are just delicate, I think is the right word. The textures are very delicate. This album features next a great tribute to Aeolian Forest. It's a cover of their song "The Land of Elves and Gnomes." This is a really cool track, and it's a really cool cover. So it takes us deeper into that light fantasy sound, but it begins to add a little bit of darkness to it. There's something interesting in the percussion here. There's a slight air of drama and danger. And that's actually expanded on in the next track. The next track is called "The Trolls Are Near." Here, there's imminent danger in our story. You know, we get these monotonous rhythms and these sort of spider leg tremolo synths. The whole song carries a sort of a whimsical suspense. There's nothing incredibly dark going on, but you know, it is an interesting dramatic piece in this album. Let's jump up to track 8 now. That's called "Path Illuminated by Fairy Magic." There's a serious tone to this track that I really love. I think it pulls in some of that reverence that we heard on track 2, and I think this is probably my favorite track on the album. It's just totally magical and ethereal. That track is followed by a track called "The Wisest Watcher Waiting." And then "These Woods Are Safe." 2 tracks that sort of play out the end of the album with these warm strings, these cozy melodies. There's such a vibrant, comfortable, emotional element to this album. And I think this is really one of the earliest examples of comfy synth, you know, that theme and style in modern dungeon synth. And yeah, like comfy synth has sort of become its own genre. It doesn't necessarily have to intersect with dungeon synth at this point. But this is really, I think, one of the roots of that genre is found here in this album. It's just got that earthy, enchanted, light fantasy ambience. You know, it's not fief. It's not as structured and medieval as that fief sound, although that sound is bright. This is something a little different. There's just a whole different tone to this. But I really do love this album. You know, from the moment it came out, I was enamored by it, and this tape is beautiful. Yeah, that's Earthencloak's debut, "Commune of the Gnomes" on Ancient Meadow Records. If you haven't heard this one, if you're not too familiar with some of the lighter sounds in dungeon synth, I would highly recommend going and checking this out. It's really a masterpiece. Like it's really fantastic. All right, next up, we are taking a look at a project from New Zealand called Sleeping Corpse. This is a compilation album of an album called Death and an EP called Time. So it's called Death and Time. And this was actually released by Canto Criptico. This is an early release from Canto Criptico. You can see here on the spine, you may be able to see anyway, that this is Canto number 2. Their second release from 2018. So this is only the second tape they ever put out. So this was definitely one of the first tapes that I picked up from Canto Criptico. And this one, I don't think I had heard this one before. So this is definitely one of those tapes where I don't think I was really familiar with it before I got it in. I think I bought it with that first drop from Canto Criptico. But I do remember very clearly listening to this for the first time. I had my boombox in my bedroom, and I was just sort of laying around playing random stuff that had come in. And I put this one on, and I was just immediately intrigued by it, by this atmosphere and this smooth, funereal sensibility to the music. In Canto Criptico fashion, you know, this is an incredibly beautiful release. It's on a black shell with really nice gold printing. And then we've got this this cover illustration, which is a memento mori attributed to Bartolome de Eyck, who was a manuscript illustrator who lived in the 15th century. And a memento mori is any piece of art like this that is symbolizing death or the inevitability of death. And that's really exemplary of what this album is. This album is kind of a huge monument to the idea of death. And this is a long album too. This is over 13 tracks, not counting that EP at the end. So it's over I think the actual album is 12 tracks, the Death album. Most of those tracks are 8 to 10 minutes, some are up to 16 minutes. And then we do have an 11-minute demo EP at the very end. So this is a huge tape release, and this is number 67 of 70. And as of the recording of this video, I just checked, there are 13 tapes still available on the artist's Bandcamp page. So don't miss this if you can go grab it. But it is coming from New Zealand, so if you're trying to ship to the States, that shipping might be a deterrent. But if you're able to pick this up, I highly recommend it. So when this starts out, Gothic is really an understatement with this. From track 1, called Sanctuarium, this is just this pure Gothic doom in synth form. That's the first thing that struck me about this album. You know, as it played, it's just so final. There's a huge sense of finality, and it's so funereal, which you know makes sense. I mean, this album is called Death. And the first couple tracks are just non-stop with these enormous blaring organ sounds, and the pacing is glacial. The notes ring out forever sometimes, so it's got that huge doom sensibility to it. When we come to track 3, the organ is replaced by some subdued synth pads, some chimes. This track is called Benumbed by Deep Dejection, and it's something of a winter synth style track. It keeps with that depressive atmosphere for sure. It's very introverted, it's a little hopeless and despairing, but it's definitely in that winter synth vibe. This is followed by a track called The Grain of Life and Time. I really dig this track in the way it brings those organs back, but it buries them under layers of pads. It's sort of like a morphing soundscape of depression. So instead of being monotonous like some depressive stuff can be in this genre, it stays really interesting, and it changes a lot through this composition. It's like a journey through a bleak, clouded land, or like an exploration of some kind. One of the highlights on this is track number 7. For me anyway, I really like track number 7, and that's called Timeline of Death and Birth. I really like long songs, as I've probably said several times in the course of the show. I like a track that you can sort of sit with and sort of go on a journey through. And this one is over 15 minutes of just dark ambience, this perfect blend of that cold winter vibe and the otherworldly funeral synth sounds that this project is, clearly basing their style in. It progresses through these phases. It subtly shifts into choral pads, and it starts to play around with those crystalline chimes. Really great track. And then we get another similar track on number 11 called The Only Words, and this is probably my favorite track on the album. This one starts out very low, very deep, it's just utterly brooding and sinister, and it's so fucking dark. Like it's just dragging you down with every note. And this goes on for like 7 minutes of the 16-minute runtime. And then suddenly around the 7-minute mark, these apprehensive rays of light come up out of that gloom. We get these synths that sort of rise out of that darkness like they've just woken up. And these develop into a smooth, old school, really traditional dungeon synth melody. I'm reminded of something like Lord Einsamkeit here, Spectral Castle, some of those modern worshippers of that old school sound. And by 10 minutes in, things are almost hopeful here. We've risen out of this black chamber, and now we're walking the fortress walls in the light of the sun. And this, just as this composition starts to really come alive and like take a turning point around that 14-minute mark, it just all drops away. It just sinks again, and we descend. Like we just sort of wilt back into that slow, lifeless blackness that started the track. So hugely cool progression here as that brooding takes over again, and that's really by far the most impressive track here for me. It's a slow build, it's effortless transitions through these emotions. It's a fantastic listen, and this whole album is just a really fantastic listen. Like again, that smooth funereal tone is amazing here. So if you're a fan of classic stuff or winter synth, this has a lot of those vibes, but it has its own very direct flavor. Or if you're a fan of doom metal or funeral doom or anything like that, check this out, because it's a really good exploration of those themes in just a purely dark ambient setting. So that's Sleeping Corpse from Canto Criptico with Death and Time. Alright, next up we have another release from Ancient Meadow Records. This is Secluded Alchemist with Laboratory Among the Leaves. Secluded Alchemist is based out of Louisville, Kentucky, and is the project of community member Nick Hassan. Nick is also behind the chiptune project Ice Golem, which has been his main project for a while now. Secluded Alchemist has a total of 5 releases. This release is from June of 2018. It features what is probably my favorite artwork from Sylvana Massa. Let's open this up. So yeah, this is probably my favorite piece of any of the numerous album covers that Sylvana Massa has created. This sort of grayscale alchemy lab, and then this comes on this really nice translucent green tape with gold lettering. Really beautiful tape. Just excellent presentation there. So let's talk about this, because this is an album that I listen to quite a lot. It's an album that I like to have playing when I work or when I write. It's a very good background album, but I do want to talk about it here because it's easy to let it go in the background and not really pay attention to what's happening sometimes. But it's oh my god, a fucking firefly just landed on me. Let's see if we can get a guest. Oh no, hang on, buddy. There we go. Are we getting that guy? We have a special guest in the analog dungeon today. This fucking firefly. You're not supposed to be in the house, little dude. We're gonna let him hang out right there. I don't know what he's gonna do, but he's gonna hang out. So anyway, yeah, if we're talking about these tracks, track 1 is called Domain of a Cloistered Life. This is some of the most beautiful music I have ever heard. Every time I listen to this album and this first track starts, it just sort of stops me. Like whatever I'm doing, I just have to stop for a second as that first note reverberates. There's something utterly transcendent about it. The song is slow and meditative, and the textures that are built around it, this lo-fi ambience that grows out of that reverberance is almost like a meditative mantra. This album is completely and totally submerged in this sort of calm, still, almost unmoving space of like forest magic. It's one of the most soothing sounds I've ever heard, and the track length here is perfect. This first track is and the second of the three actually are both around 12 minutes long. So you just have so much time to really ruminate on them. And the first one, honestly, I've put that one on loop before and just let it play over and over. Next up on this is our title track, Laboratory Among the Leaves. This track, it takes that oh, my dude's crawling here. It takes that ambience. Where you going, dude? Oh, don't come down here on me. Let's see, where were we? So yeah, that next track, Laboratory Among the Leaves, it takes that ambience, that steady structure of track one. It replaces some of the warmth and the smoothness with, oh, he's flying away. He landed on my metal cassette rack over here. I think he's more of a fan of death metal. Sorry, guy, we're not covering death metal today. Anyway, so yeah, we're replacing that sort of warmth and smoothness from that first track with a little bit of murkiness and a little bit of intrigue. Just a little. It's just a little variation on the theme, basically. So every time, every so often, we get a hint of this strangeness here, of this sort of wonder of the unknown. This song is kind of like walking aimlessly through the forest. It's like getting lost in the woods, and you're staring up at this maze of tree trunks and this canopy, and you can hear the light coming through the leaves in this track. You can hear the pine straw under your feet. It really sets me in a forest setting. Like it's a very clear setting for me. And then we have a third track here, and this is a really impressive track. This is called Regarding the Great Work, and this is a massive track over 22 minutes, split into 4 sections called Negrito, Albedo, Citronitas, and Rubido. And these are the 4 stages of the alchemical great work, or the magnum opus, which is like the sort of end game for the alchemical study. So we start with a piece called Negrito. This is the blackening or the putrefying, the sort of the destruction of the self in alchemy. Here our synth tones are tense, they're low and dark. There's a lot of a huge sound of like being unsure here. There's these long droning tones that become almost gothic in nature, very different from what we heard on track 1 and 2, this gothic atmosphere. Then we come to Albedo, which is the whitening, a kind of purification. We shift here to this pure, ethereal, wafting tone. It's bright, it's calming, it's closer to what we heard on track 1. There's a very choral vocal quality that fades in here. It's like we're passing through a veil of spirits. This section feels very spiritual, almost new age in tone. Next up is Citronitas, or Citronitas, the yellowing, which seems to entail turning silver into gold, a classical alchemical feat. It can also mean the dawning of light within the alchemist, a sort of enlightening, I suppose, of the alchemist. here we shift again. The tone remains positive, but there's a burgeoning sound to it, like an imminent feeling, as if something's going to happen, like something's just on the verge of taking place. And there's certainly a quality of light to this track, a radiance about the reverb. And then we finally come to our finale, Rubido, the reddening, the coalescence of the previous steps into the Philosopher's Stone. This is the most interesting section. There's just a lot going on here. There's a triumph, a sense of ending, a bittersweetness, also a sense of mystery and unknowing. It's like an ending and a beginning all at once. This track is so masterful, so well structured, and just definitive in concept. This is a project that needs way more attention, and this album is truly a unique progression of structure and ambience. This is one of my highest recommendations to you. Check this out immediately. That's Secluded Alchemist with Laboratory Amongst the Leaves from Ancient Meadow Records. All right, up next is Dungeons of Irithyll. This is a project out of Ontario, and this debut album is called A Journey Through the Dark. This bills itself as a three-person project made up of Alec of Astora, Dregmire of Karim, and Abysswalker Cathas. Some folks will know that this is a project based specifically on the video game Dark Souls, and this album in particular concerns Dark Souls 3. This came out in 2016, and it was released by Depressive Illusions, a label out of Ukraine that specializes in everything from black metal to drone to dark ambient to noise to dungeon synth, just a lot more. It's literally this hive on the internet of underground projects on just a plethora of media, especially cassette. And these tapes are all hand dubbed to order, I believe, and you can see here that this is just a blank tape. And this cover art, while looking straight out of some old school D&D supplement, is actually a modern piece by an artist on DeviantArt called Mintat0209. And that's the only attribution on the Bandcamp page. Dungeons of Irithyll also released an incredibly good album this year in 2020 that expands into original Dark Souls lore. So it's still in that Dark Souls theme, but it's got just a lot of original content in it. That album has yet to see a physical release, unfortunately. But before we jump into these tracks, let me read the statement on their Bandcamp page. It says, "A Journey Through the Dark is the debut album of the wandering trio known as the Silent Watchers. The album follows the mortal and linear pilgrimage of a lonesome warrior through a perilous dungeon deep within the land of lords. May the enchantments give light to the traveler's quest." So this album begins with just pure, utter dungeon synth. It's bleak, it's mournful, it's got this droning brass, this slight bits of distortion and noise, and that distortion and noise is really present through all of this album to really give it that lo-fi texture. It's very medieval and martial. This first track is called Ash Seeketh Embers, and it serves as a cold, uncomfortable welcome to this world inspired by the equally cold and uncomfortable setting of the Dark Souls universe. This next track that really stands out to me is track 3. It's called Undead Abode. This harsh, dank, somehow restful melody with this harsh, faded, guttural vocal in the background. This is really dense with that lo-fi old school sensibility, especially when you start bringing those vocals into it. This could have come out of the 90s scene easily. Track 5, that's called Delving Deep. That carries that same vibe. It almost feels amateurish in production. It's got this simple, monotonous piano, percussion that's just a little bit off kilter with the rest of the track. Beautiful tape hiss all throughout the background. And this is another just perfect dungeon track. You know, it feels like wandering these twisting subterranean halls, and you can hear your footsteps echo off the stone in this one. This is followed by a track called The Boreal Valley. And this is a grim, frostbitten track, just like its namesake. You know, it's got these huge resonating synths at the end of the track that are just like banner waving in dark majesty. And this is just right on par with all of these old traditions of the genre. My favorite track here is the Grand Archives. That's track number 8. This is referring to the Grand Archive in Dark Souls 3, this huge sort of towering library full of ruined halls and like labyrinthine staircases. There's a dark, reverent kind of beauty to this track. We get more vocals here, this sort of soft, distorted vocal stuff that goes on behind the track. And it's kind of like we're being led around on a tour of these archives by someone. And there's a nice balance here of curiosity and menace as we press on through this hostile world. And our last 2 tracks are called Still Closed. That one's a warm tribute to the Knights of Katarina, and this is our sort of our one reprieve here from all of the sorrow and the harshness in this dungeon delve. And then we come to the last track, An Ancient Monarch Laid to Rest, where we depart this album to sad, somber, trickling piano melodies. It's really cool to hear something modern that sounds like this. It's so ingrained in that first era dungeon synth sound. It's just completely lo-fi, simplistic in certain respects, almost amateurish, but that's kind of deceptive. You know, I feel like it's carefully crafted to sound this way. And so homage to video games as well. You know, a lot of great Dark Souls projects have cropped up after this one. Calamite, Bellkeeper, Nameless King, First Flame. You know, Dark Souls is really a modern well of inspiration for dark ambient music like this, and yeah, I think this one is really the first project to draw from that well, and like, goddamn, they did a really amazing job at it. So that's Dungeons of Irithyll with A Journey Through the Dark, one of the earlier tapes that I picked up when I got into the scene. I think the first tape that I brought in from overseas, from the Ukraine. Really great stuff, and I really hope that that new album from this year gets a pressing, because it's really a step up in songwriting for this project, and really an interesting album on the whole for the genre. So check out both of those from Dungeons of Irithyll. Alright guys, we've got 2 tapes left. The first one we're going to look at is actually a project from my home state of Alabama. This is Bitter Old Wizard with Southern Grim. This is another project and one of the earliest projects from Chad Deese, who went on to make music as Solitude and now Lord Einsome Kite and Obsidian Towers, among a lot of other smaller projects. We looked at Obsidian Towers' debut, The Call of Black Majesty, in an earlier episode, and that album is, like much of his latest work, really in the vein of pure black metal adjacent old school dungeon synth. Bitter Old Wizard is a project where it would seem that he was sort of first experimenting with these sounds, with bringing in fantasy influence and dungeon synth influence, and sort of making these lo-fi demos, sort of cutting his teeth on the genre. And the Bitter Old Wizard stuff is really still some of my favorite output from him. It includes 6 demos, a split with Blood Tower, and this Southern Grim, which is really the sole full length from that project, and sort of the end point for that project. This was released in August of 2018, and this is an album about anxiety and fear and sour memory. and it's steeped in the atmosphere of the wooded small town South that, you know, I'm pretty familiar with as well as him. So it just really appeals to me on a lot of levels for that reason. This is on a black tape with just simple white printing. And then this cover photo here is a photo of the artist brandishing a knife. Beautiful photography in the tradition of the genre is what you always will find with this artist. Another really great photo on the inside here. And this is the original pressing of out of 50. And then on the inside we have a dedication. Thanks to the bitter old witch, thanks to the little wizards, thanks to the Meadow Walker, time and patience are appreciated, death and dungeons. A beautiful statement of intent there, I think. And when this album first came out, I wrote a short review on Bandcamp for this that I'm going to read you now because I think it still holds up with my opinion of this album. What I wrote was this album is an old house in the woods. It's boarded up and overrun with kudzu. It's both a deeply melancholic refuge and a sinister work that stands behind you as you listen to it. So keep that sort of flavorful description in mind as we go through this. So from top to bottom here, I really love every bit of this one. We open with field recordings, trickling stream, echoing and isolated, joined by a howling wind. Then the synths hit. The characteristic sound of this album comes in. These thick, warbling synth tones, just sort of sickly and putrid and depressive. And this introduction is perfectly strange and off-center and highly effective. This is followed by a track called My Discomfort Grows. This is where, for me, I start to hold this album in really high regard. I'm a horror enthusiast before all things. It's sort of it's sort of the genre at the forefront of my my love for any speculative fiction or music or atmospheric music. The atmosphere that Chad builds on this track is really something to envy, I think. These long piano notes that he lets ring out are terrifying, like looking into an empty room. They flow into this melody that shifts from sweet to sinister in just a few notes. It's just a work of art, in my opinion. And that imbalance, that swaying of emotions, really does cause discomfort. Next is a track called Welcome to the Southern Grim. Those thick synths come back here. They're wobbling between spooky, almost Halloween decoration ambience to this sort of truly upsetting sensibility. It's like the longer you look at something that shouldn't be scary, it can turn strange and alien. That's kind of the way these tracks feel sometimes. Track 4, that's called Innocence Through Suffering. This one's just melancholic and mean. Those sort of sick tones come back here. They're juxtaposed at the end by piercing, ear-splitting wails. Next up is The Morning Star. This features more clean piano alongside some kind of strange distortion. This track is really disquieting for me. It's very sort of full of nervous energy, apprehensive energy, and a real sense of helplessness. I love what this album does on those first 6 tracks. It builds this lonesome, anxiety-ridden soundscape. Because then we get to track 7, which is my favorite track, where a lot of that sort of comes to fruition. This is called Witch in the Corner. Honestly, this track has frightened me before. I've sat in a room alone listening to this, listening to these synths build up on themselves feeling that tension rise and feeling that theme really come alive. A witch in the corner, like, you know, there's something there and you can't see it unless you look hard enough. And I had to get up and like leave the room. You know, I had to go somewhere else where there were other people because it just freaked me the fuck out. And that's really effective. That's masterful work. The handling of the unsettling terror and the disquieting anxiety that goes on with this album is totally brilliant. We have one more piece here called the Midland Marsh that finishes this album off. It's just a dank dungeon synth ode to the humid southern town where Chad lives. And you know, as a piece of music, as a piece of dungeon synth, and a piece of gothic fucking horror, this whole thing is just a masterwork. This is really one of my favorite albums of the genre. You know, maybe, let's say, you know, if there's a top 5 for me, this is up there in the top 5, along with the next one. It's one I always recommend. This is Bitter Old Wizard's final album, Southern Grim. Just a beautiful piece of southern horror put to tape. All right, let's hydrate very briefly. Okay, last tape. This is, of course, a huge one. This is the incomparable Hedge Wizard. You know, Hedge Wizard is an Ohio-based artist who was making music way back in 2014 before I, or a lot of us who are in the scene now, had ever even heard of this music. This debut, one of only 2 releases from this artist, is called More True Than Time Thought. And this is one of the most legendary modern masterpieces of dungeon synth in existence. It has its detractors, you know, I'm sure, you know, I see these people out there, but I'm going to say it now, they're just wrong. This is one of the most brilliant pieces of music to come out of dungeon synth. Its sound is phenomenal, its scope is all-encompassing, it's nostalgic, it's mystic, it's strange, it's dark, it's wondrous, it's whimsical. It's just so many things that feed into this genre. It's from an artist who I think is still relatively anonymous. I'm sort of vaguely aware of who it is, but I think it's still something that's sort of borderline anonymous. The cover, let's open this up. So this cover, let's take a good look at that. You know, this cover is all hand-drawn. It has this totally outsider, underground aesthetic. It's some of the most eye-catching art of any release, with this sort of ancient tome J-card that has never been done better. This is likely a release that you will hear early on when you get into the genre, or, you know, it was for me, and it's always stuck with me as absolutely perfect, absolutely a milestone when talking about this kind of music. It suits almost any mood. So this was originally released on cassette, released by the artist on cassette, and there are 2 original versions. The first is on a purple shell, and the second release from the artist is on a butterscotch shell. I don't have either of those, unfortunately. This is probably one of the only releases where I'm absolutely in need of those original pressings. Other stuff, I am fairly happy with represses of whatever variety I can get. With this one, I kind of just want every pressing. Here I have 2 tapes from Children of the Night, Foreign Sounds recording. This one is on Translucent Red. This is the one that I play if I listen to it. And then this one is on a gold shell. So this one I've never played, and I probably never will. So I do have both of those. And then I also have the CD release from Foreign Sounds that preceded this cassette repress. And I also have the incredible 12-inch Swamp Green vinyl from Dungeons Deep Records that has alternative cover art, a really beautiful pressing from Dungeons Deep, and you know, really an album that deserved to be on vinyl, even though honestly it sounds better on tape. But you know, it definitely needed that vinyl treatment, just as another way to hear it, really. And there's nothing on the inside of that J card. So I got incredibly lucky on the second release from this artist. The second release they put out is called Local Portal. It's just a demo, but I actually did catch that cassette, so I do have that one, and we'll probably look at it in another episode. So let's talk about this, and I'm going to ramble and bullshit pretty hard about these songs, so just bear with me on this one. So this opens with a track called Ancient Vibrations, and just like every time I hear it, it's so goddamn pleasing. Like, right when that rich, warm opening note hits, you're just wrapped in fucking magic. Like, it's totally perfect. And the lead melody on this track, it has this longing that it encapsulates, this need for the otherworldly, for the ancient, for the fantastic. It's such a pure feeling that I think, I hope at least everyone else can relate to like I can. This is really what this is about for me. This is more than momentary escapism. It's just a constant fucking longing for something else, for something that doesn't exist, something that's unreal. If it was real, it wouldn't hold that same fascination. It is unreal by design. That's sort of what this track says to me. It conjures this notion of the impossible and the unattainable, this mystic aura of a better time and place, better just because it's totally separate from what is, from this time and space. And the only other artist I think that really captures that the way this does is Erang, as the nature of Erang's work is dealing with that feeling on a very intimate, personal level. But here on this album from Hedge Wizard, it's captured and it's compartmentalized in such an iconic way. So next up we have Huffing Petrichor. Petrichor being the scent of rain on soil. The smell of the earth, of the magic of nature. This is an ode to nature, to what is actually beautiful about our world. Musically here, we have this beautiful fief-like melody over that distorted, aggressively textured pad that just drives this album. You can sort of feel this album. You can touch it. This lo-fi sensibility is pushed to an extreme, not an extreme of harshness or offensiveness, but it leans fully into that deliberate lack of polish. It takes the sounds that come from natural low fidelity and it just amplifies all of that, and it uses them as an instrument. Next up, we have Odd Visions, where the percussion, this slow drum beat and this huge crashing cymbal sort of lulls us into another state as the melodies weave these cosmic images where every chiming note sounds like a star in the sky. Brilliant piece of music. And then next, after that, we have track 4, Old as the Hills. This track is almost mournful. It's bittersweet. It's an elegy for time itself, or of the passage of time, for the things that do change and the things that don't change with that passage. There's a reverence here, I think, for the concept of the ancient. Not necessarily one ancient thing, but the idea of things that are lasting, things that stay with us, and the reason that those things stay with us. The next track is called Cemetery Violence. This is just sort of a fun track. It starts out fast-paced with this hammering rhythmic bass, then it descends into anxious, dangerous ambience. This feels like a very tabletop-ready song, something to score a dungeon adventure with. It's not as introspective as the other tracks. Track 6 is called Conjurer's Clutter. I really appreciate some of the subtle notes and passages that happen almost under the surface in this one. It's long, it's got these droning sounds that build on one another. It has a sense of extreme concentration, of meditation. The sweeping string here that repeats over this over and over is probably one of my favorite sounds on this whole album. I think maybe I would recommend that one to anybody who wants to sort of try out the album. This is a great example without delving too deep into the more emotional parts of the album that really gives you an overview of the sound. Like track 1, you know, there's like some distorted synth pads here, but the melodies are really dynamic, really woven together, really beautiful to my ear, and one of the more complex arrangements on the album, I think. Just a really great progression, particularly in the middle where everything else subdues and allows this plucked string to take center stage. Then the drums come flooding back over all that, and the instruments rush back in. Really incredible song, and another fun one. Then finally, we come to the title track that ends this album. That's called More True Than Time Thought. It's a quiet song as we start off, sort of back to that introspection, back to that sense of wonder. Then the melodies start to pick up these strange electronic passages with occasional bending, warping notes. And the ending is just loud and bombastic and epic in the sort of strange way that something like this can be epic. But it's just sort of truly deserving of that huge ending. It ends on a huge high. It feels like it's proud of itself, and it should be. You know, this song, I think it just sort of speaks to the listener here at the very end, you know, invites them to look back at the album they've just heard, to really think about these tracks and sort of reflect on it and dig into the meaning of that title, which I've always been trying to work out. More true than time thought. Like, what does that mean? Because it's a really curious album title. And the conclusion that I've come to is, you know, maybe it means something like there is more true, more real in the world, or out of it, or to us as we perceive it, than time has proved thus far. You know, there's magic out there. There's wonder to be seen and created, and just because time hasn't proven something real yet doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean you can't make it real. So that's, you know, an interesting thought, and that's the end of my bullshit for that album. And that's it, folks. That's the end of Analog Dungeon on NEDSTV Season 1. That is 12 episodes, something like 10 hours or so now of me talking nonsense about this nerdy shit that I love. We've covered 67 separate analog releases of dungeon synth, dark ambient, and heavy metal on this first season. I will be going on hiatus for the next couple months at least. My wife and I will be celebrating our 16th anniversary next month in September. And then in October, we will be celebrating our birthdays, and then Halloween, which is a very important time for us, the only holiday we really celebrate. But I will be hitting you guys with a Halloween episode the week of Halloween, so that will air probably the Wednesday before Halloween in the usual time slot, and we'll look at some spooky tapes. So I want to thank some folks, of course. First of all, Davey from Serpent Sword Records, who really gave me the push to do this when he sent me the giant box of tapes from Serpent Sword that we looked at earlier this year. His wonderful and creative partner, Ray, who always has something encouraging to say. They make beautiful artwork, beautiful dungeon synth. Chad for his friendship and his fantastic music, Sam for his friendship and always allowing me to hear the works in progress at Secret Corridor. Jen Taiga, who goes out of her way to show support for this show and for everybody, despite a hugely busy schedule of being a literal fucking sorceress of synth music. Men of Velastraz for constantly inspiring me with his music. Jordan of Ancient Meadow Records for being the first person from this scene to reach out to me and bring me into the fold, basically. Danny of Gondolin Records, Andrew of Dungeons Deep Records, Joey of Rot Records, Justin at Monsters, Madness, and Magic for allowing me the opportunity to join him at his publication, to really get some writing done this year to talk about Dungeon Synth in that forum as well. Daniel of Saragost for his friendship, his work on that blog, and his astounding showmanship as a Dungeon Synth artist, and for always posting links to the show. Fans like myself, Carl Shoemaker, Joshua Kerr, all these folks that are always on the front lines to support the scene, that come here and support the show. I can't thank you guys enough. It's just a ton of other people that I can't even think of right now. I'm sure as soon as I stop recording, I'll think of a dozen more people I should have thanked. So I'll try to thank you in comments and in chat groups and whatnot. And of course, Josh Pratt, Nagana, the warrior bard of Somber Arcane, and the unrelenting fucking defender of this genre. And Shane Hall, the incorrigible wizard frantic who weaves his fucking magic around whatever task he sets himself to, whether it's editing these videos or making dope fucking music or just resonating hate for scum fucking cops while he's out looking after protesters. His support in all aspects of the world is irreplaceable. And finally, thank you to my infinitely talented wife for creating the logo for this series and for the cool artwork that you guys haven't even seen yet. And for putting up with my bullshit and my teetering towers of cassettes all over the goddamn house. And for just being the only human being that I can fucking stand to be around most of the time. But that's all for now, everybody. That's the dungeon is closing its doors for the moment, but not for too long. And so I will see you soon. And remember, and say it with me, all cassettes are beautiful.